أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه وصلوات الله وسلامه على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا ورضي عن صحباته الراشدين المباركين ورحمة على تابعين لهم بخير وإحسان إلى يوم الدين وأما بعد ثم يقول الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولتكن منكم أمة يدعون إلى الخير ويأمرون بالمعروف وينهون عن المنكر وأولئك هم المفلحون صدق الله العلي العظيم. Brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. First of all, let me say it's an honor and privilege for me to be here at this year's UMAA conference, and I've spoken at many Islamic conferences, both here and abroad, but this is my first time at UMAA, and Jazakumullahu khairan to all the organizers and as well as all the speakers for this event. I would like to speak just very briefly on this topic of unity of purpose, but be very specific. And I think that sometimes when we talk about unity in general, we talk about these high platitudes and discuss things as far as unifying the ummah that are really outside of our sphere of influence. So I'm going to propose to you today is that for us in Dearborn, Michigan, to talk about how we're going to solve problems between Salafiyin and Alawiyin in Syria is not feasible. To talk about how we're going to bring together rifts as Muslims here in America between Sunni and Shi'i in Iraq or Boko Haram and Sufis in Nigeria, that is outside of our immediate sphere of influence. And sometimes it's easier for us to talk about those things halfway across the world instead of focusing on those things in our localities, because once we start talking about things in our localities right in front of our face, it then obligates us to do something. So within this, I say that we need nizam, or structure, an organization about how we're going to bring our community together in terms of this unity of purpose. And I see, from my perspective, two things that split us. And just to let you know, I'm an Azadi, Zaini Shi'i. I'm a Zaidi, so I'm not Madhab Jafari, so I just want to throw that out there to you. I have a different school of thought. One is Hizbiyah. In other words, Hizbiyah is my scholar is on the haq and this scholar is on the haq. He's not on the haq. Or my marja is on the haq more and his is weaker. Or the haq is totally with my madhab and with my scholar, and the rest of those people they're dalala, they're astray. That causes us not to work together for common interests of Muslims in the United States of America. The second one is another form, or is not or asabiyya, or al-unsuriya, racism, which is one of the issues that divides our community. When we have communities and board of directors who reflect one ethnicity, sometimes all from the same village, where people in the community want to go and want to marry someone, and the only reason for turning down the young man or the young woman is because, oh, her skin is too dark, or maybe she needs some fair and lovely for a little while. Her skin's too dark. Or he's black and she's Arab. This is the types of things that hold back our unity and unity of purpose. My esteemed brother right here quoted something in the Quran, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. Hold on tight, all of you, to God's rope and don't divide yourselves. But the ayah that comes before is actually the prerequisite for وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. You see, those believers who have taqwa and are seeking to die in a state of complete submission, when the unity of purpose is to call towards Allah Azza wa Jal and pleasing Allah Azza wa Jal instead of treating our own hizb or treating our own racial or ethnic group like some type of false god or some sort of idol. See, we can't have real unity unless we are doing what we're doing for the sake of pleasing Allah Azza wa Jal, not to elevate our own hizb or our own qabila or tribe. See, this is where it comes down to. So I talked about nizam. Let me give you, we have something in the Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. To address these issues, because we know that in Asr Jahiliyyah, the hallmark characteristic of Arab society in Hijaz was al-asabiyya. This ta'asub. So one of the things he did when he went to Medina is that he had a brotherhood compact where he made one of the companions a best friend with another companion, male and female. So for instance, Bilal ibn Rabah, ex-slave, mother was Ethiopian, was made best friends with Abu Darda, who was Madani and was Arab, for instance. These relationships and these brotherhood compacts, Zayd bin Haritha, who was an ex-slave, was made the best friend with Amr Rasulillah, Hamza. This was done very purposefully as a way of bringing the hearts together of Muslim brothers and sisters who were once divided. So this was done organized. Another thing is, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam purposely tried to break up the tribalistic mentality amongst the Arabs through marriages that he officiated and actually were a part of himself. You know, Mu'minin Mariya Qibtiyya, radiyallahu anha, she was not an Arab. You know that, right? Egyptians did not used to be, they weren't Arabs until Islam came and Arabized North Africa. She wasn't an Arab, but she's Mu'minin. And we have different other marriages. The marriage of Amir al-Mu'minin Ali, alayhi salam, to the mother of Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiya. She is described in the books of being Kanat Sindiya Sauda. Sindiya Sauda, she was from India and she had very black skin. You see? These were steps that were used to bring together the hearts. Now, I was talking about also, and I will conclude with this point, and I agree 100% with what he says, that it's part of our job of establishing justice. Unity does not mean uniformity. So we're not going to get rid of everyone's school of thought, and people shouldn't have the marja that they follow, and that we shouldn't hold on to our cultural expressions. No, Islam did not call for that. But our unity of purpose relating to what is going to please Allah Azza wa Jal and what's going to help give Muslims a dignified existence in America is that we are to be a people of establishing justice, and primarily in the land that we live in. Primarily the land that we live in. Tomorrow is Memorial Day. It's a national holiday. Many of us don't know how Memorial Day started. Memorial Day was a holiday started by African Americans in the state of South Carolina that helped honor the Union soldiers who died in the Civil War who were fighting for the emancipation of the enslaved African people. That's the start of Memorial Day. And as much as this country has freedoms and blessings, make no mistake about it, this country was also established upon white supremacy. We had speakers talking about Thomas Jefferson earlier today, who wrote the Declaration of Independence, who had some admiration for Islam. But this same man owned over 200 slaves. It's estimated that at least 2 of them most likely were Muslim. He wrote the 3/5 clause that said that black people constituted 3/5 of a human being according to America. And he oversaw ethnic cleansing of Native Americans. This is part of the history of our country that we live in right now. What are we doing as Muslims to unify to right the wrongs of this country? By us righting the wrongs of this country, fighting against structural racism, this is a way of also fighting against Islamophobia. فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم جبلت قلوب على حب من أسنى إليها. See, whoever does good for the people, their hearts naturally turn to love them. Their hearts naturally turn. So I believe this should be our unity of purpose. We should try to minimize all of this sectarianism and racism amongst ourselves, get together in a very organized way to deal with each other in a very intentional way across different boundaries, socioeconomic, racial boundaries. And let's organize ourselves to do something to benefit the United States of America, to benefit Canada, to benefit the UK, so that we can have a more dignified existence as Muslims here in the West. أقول قولي هذا استغفر الله لي ولكم والحمد لله رب العالمين.
صلوات برحمة الله من الله. Thank you so much, Hajj Dawood Walid. He definitely hit on a lot of topics and themes that inshallah we're going to expand upon briefly. This session, we hope to tackle unity in different layers as well. There's different layers of unity that already some of the themes that are coming out in the opening sessions. One also that Hajj Dawood that referred to, that we've done that through UMAA and through the various activities that's gone on, there's been quite a bit of outreach within the broader Muslim community, the Shia and Sunni, bring them together. There's one thing that I think hasn't really been done that well, or that hasn't really been done much at all, is addressing unity amongst the broader Shia community. We have a predominantly Ithna Ashari community here, and although they're not, claiming to speak on behalf of their communities, but giving a perspective from the Zaydiya Shia community, and our next speaker giving a perspective from the Ismaili Shia community. So I'd like to request Dr. Hussein Rashid to give his opening remarks. Please welcome him with a loud salawat.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much for the invitation, for having me here. I want to begin by saying I find myself in a great deal of sympathy with what Brother Dawood just said. All politics is local. I'm born and bred New Yorker. And inshallah, we'll be able to develop that a little bit more during the course of our conversation. Do I just need to hold it up a little bit more? Okay. Is this better? Okay. I can actually hear myself. Alhamdulillah. Okay. So what I want to do is, before we get into some of the specific issues we were going into, as Brother Azmat said, I'm not speaking for the Ismaili community. For those of you who know, we within the Ismaili community, I will be talking about the Imam, and by that I mean the Aga Khan, who we believe to be the present living Imam of the age. When I talk about the Imam has given several very public speeches recently at Brown University and at the Canadian Parliament. And I just want to take a second to talk about that as it feeds into the conception of unity of purpose. Because I think that it gives you an indication of what the community is thinking about right now. Again, not in any official capacity, but because these are very public, I think it's important to understand. So the Imam says that for us, faith is manifested through concern of the improvement of the human condition in all its dimensions. So that is, when we think about how do we express our faith in the world, clearly devotion and prayer is an important part of that, but service to others becomes the defining characteristic that we wish to present to the world. And it's not just in terms of spiritual upliftment, but also in terms of material upliftment. And not for the Ismaili Jamaat only, but for the human condition as a whole. Because when we concern ourselves with only one aspect of the community, that the community itself does not improve, and therefore the things that we wish to improve will not in fact actually change. That if we change for one person, we have not changed the conditions where that person was oppressed in the first place. So to change the entirety of that condition as best as we can. That means helping beyond who I normally would identify with. The second thing he says, and if you're interested in reading either of these speeches, they're on the Aga Khan Development Network website. He says that we have so many conflicts in the world. Some of them involve Muslims, some of them don't involve Muslims, some of them involve Muslims on Muslims. He says, here in the United States and in Canada, we see this as a fundamentally theological problem. That those who love the Ahlul Bayt are hated by those who don't. But that, of course, is a mistake, right? Who would call themselves Muslim and say, I hate the Prophet and his family? You would not see that. So understanding what is a theological debate and what is a political debate that has on this theological veneer. In other words, if we say that God has ordained this battle, the battle will never end. If we say that we have created as human beings a situation where we have come to hate each other, then it is possible for us as human beings to create a situation where we may love one another. And that this too is within our control, that we may change our own condition of ourselves. The Imam also in these speeches made a comment in terms of where our community should be going. And he says that as a community, we should be making inroads in media. That when you turn on CNN and there's a news on Islam and Muslims, who's on there? If you're watching British news, it's Anjum Chowdhury. And I think Syed Amar spoke about him briefly yesterday. I don't know. But if you don't know who he is, he's somebody who will give the worst name to Islam in the best possible circumstances. Right? You can say there was a blood drive given by 100 Muslims for the British Muslim population. He will turn around and say, it's because Muslims enjoy spilling blood. You know? This is the type of guy he is. And we have our own Muslims who do this, right? So who on there? And so it's not a Sunni Shia thing. It's the crazies versus the non-crazies. But if we're going to try to fight to get a representation of a sane Muslim voice, let's make sure that we also get Shia thought in there. Because we can talk about Adala, not just conceptually, but from the heart of our being. Right? And that conviction carries so much weight. So let's bring that to the front. Then the Imam tells us we should be making inroads in academia. Because where is it that the community will flourish most? Right? If we need to be the best, if we are called as a matter of faith to be the best that we can be, that means getting the best education. That means sending our children to the best schools. But how is it that they will learn in Islam that only mentions Imam Ali as a Rashidun Khalif? How is that the totality of their experience or the Islam that they know? That is as alienating to our community and the future of our community as hearing that there is no such thing as imamate from those who would curse us. Right? We have to be able to make space for our future generations in all their environments, in all their spaces. The last thing the Imam says to us is that we need to be working with like-minded communities, wherever we may find them. And I want to mention briefly, this is outside the context of the speech, but we have two parallel institutional tracks within our community. One is devotional and faith-based. The other is development-based through the Aga Khan Development Network. One of the several things the Aga Khan Development Network has done, and I want to share with you because I want to show you how we've been thinking about working with like-minded communities. We've established in Pakistan the Aga Khan University for Healthcare Sciences. We're now developing a 3-campus university in Central Asia for Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Kazakhstan, offering what we would define as a liberal arts degree, but with Islamic education built in there. Each campus dealing with the needs of each country. So Tajikistan is dealing with living in mountainous regions. Kazakhstan is dealing with being in an earthquake zone, and so on. We put out a series of publications through the Institute of Ismaili Studies, which, inshallah, have slowly been adopted by universities, including working with Ayatollah Jafar Sobhani on one of his publications that we've put out. The AKDN has also worked on restorations. Now, this is something that I think is very important. A lot of people don't understand why there's the Aga Khan Award for Architecture, why we restore these historic places in Delhi, why we've been working in Aleppo before the civil war broke out. And I think this comes back to the question of, and I know we'll be talking about this a little bit later, but Janat al-Baqi. You have to understand, when our history is erased, then somebody else tells us who we are. Right? Somebody is taking control of our story when they erase the things that we have built to represent who we believed ourselves to be and the best of what we can be. And so the preservation of these sites is a chance for us to remember our own history and live that out in public. So we do these restorations. We run a madrasa system in East Africa. We have funded a hydroelectric power project in Kenya for energy independence for Kenya. And we've worked with the Smithsonian Museum here in New York on a variety of cultural and musical projects in order to say, hey, these are the cultural elite. These are the people who want to know what Islam is about. They're going to come to this museum, and here we've got movies and musics and arts of the Muslim world here for you to see and observe and participate in. So trying to use our histories, and I want to be very clear, none of this benefits only the Ismaili community, is only Ismaili related, but benefits a larger community. And this is a way to tell our stories and keep our histories alive, to say this is who we are. And so who are the partners we work with? We work with Stanford, we work with Harvard, we work with Oxford and Cambridge for our academic side. We've worked with Qom to get some of these publications out, so that there is a demand and an interest from our various communities to try to figure out how to do this. So this is where perspective of the community is coming from. And as I said, I find myself very sympathetic to what Brother Dawood was saying, and inshallah we'll be able to get into some meat in terms of what that means in the American context. And thank you for your time. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rashid. And I think one of the aspects of unity that we want to expound upon is that how much both or all communities have to gain from collaborative efforts. Obviously, the Ismaili community has been very active in the world of academia and humanitarian efforts that you've just heard just a short synopsis of. And our hope is that as our communities come closer together, as you unify more in the theme of unity of purpose, that we can, through collaborations, expand these efforts even more and hopefully impact a larger, broader community amongst the Muslim community. So thank you. And then finally, I'd like to ask Sheikh Muhammad Al-Hilli to make a few remarks. It's our opening remarks have taken essentially our whole session, but we'll do have Sheikh Muhammad Al-Hilli have our opening remarks. Sheikh Hilli, as I mentioned earlier, is an esteemed scholar and is someone who's very well known to a lot of us. Very motivational. He's very hands-on in the community with the youth, and he has a very strong, which provides him with a very strong perspective of the pulse of our community. So, Sheikh, please, just a few minutes for opening remarks.
Thank you very much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Bari al-Khalaiq ajma'een, Ba'ith al-Anbiya'i wal-Mursaleen, was-salatu was-salamu ala khayri khalqihi ajma'een, Muhammad wa ala ahli baytihi al-tayyibeen al-tahirin. Esteemed brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is very difficult to engage or perhaps enter in a discussion after lunch. I think most people, perhaps their bodies are very actively digesting what they've just had. So inshallah, we'll try and keep the discussion lively, and hopefully we can generate some positive, transformational ideas for the progression of the Muslim community, especially in the United States. But I'd like to begin by telling you a story that happened to me last year, and that should inshallah awaken those who are asleep at the moment. The idea was that I was presenting a show on one of the satellite channels, Shia satellite channels, during the month of Ramadan. I was the presenter, and I was the one who takes the calls, and I was the one who answers the questions, and of course I was the one who said goodbye. I was by myself, and I received an interesting phone call amongst the many. One I had from China, another one from Nigeria. Don't worry, no one asking for money or they're stuck or anything. They were just asking for the questions about the month of Ramadan and so on and so forth. But one phone call stuck in my mind. That particular individual was a non-Muslim. I don't often get non-Muslim callers to the show. The show was about the month of Ramadan, fasting, so on and so forth. I had spoken about the beauty and the magnificence of the best of God's creation, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. How he was a beacon of light, how he was the embodiment of mercy, forgiveness. I spoke about these. This individual picked up and called and said, you know, I'm not watching your show. I was flicking through the channels and I heard you talk about your prophet. And that attracted me. But you know what? I'll be honest with you, he said, I don't believe you. I don't take anything what you say to be truth. I said, why? I'm so grateful for your call. But I want to know, why is it that you don't believe what I said? He said, because in practice what I see out there in the Muslim world does not reflect what you're talking about. If your Prophet was a man of peace, love, coexistence and mercy, why is it that you're killing each other in Syria and other parts of the world? Tell me, why are you doing that? You have a leader who is the crystallization of all these humanitarian values, yet you're slaughtering each other. And that's all I've got to say. And he ended the phone call. That particular statement resonated in my mind. We all talk about unity and we feel, rightly so, passionate about the importance of coming together for the unity of purpose. Muslims, wherever we come from, from wherever denomination, sect, group. The Quran informs us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, for instance, whilst the esteemed brothers were talking about the subject of unity of purpose, two verses in the Quran came to my mind. One was in chapter 3, verse 105. The Almighty subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ تَفَرَّقُوا وَاخْتَلَفُوا مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا جَاءَتْهُمُ الْبَيِّنَاتِ. Do not be like those who cause disunity and division after clear proof has been presented to them. Which means what? Which means that lack of unity and disunity is not an option. It's not something that you and I say, you know what, can I opt out please? I don't like the idea. I'll rather sit down and watch people killing each other or hating each other and spreading venom and discord. No, Quran says it is obligatory to stand together. And then in the Almighty subhanahu wa ta'ala in chapter 8 verse number 63 says, do you know this whole notion of the Muslim ummah? Do you think you've created this? No, wrong. Allah says, I have created this love amongst you. وَأَلَّفَ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِهِمْ. Allah created this love, this bond between the believing brothers and sisters, the believers. لو أنفقت ما في الأرض جميعا ما ألفت بين قلوبهم. If you spend whatever exists in the earth, on this planet, you cannot bring together in unity. ولكن الله ألف بينهم. Allah loves unity, therefore He's united the Muslims. At least coming together by heart. Now, I'm going to make things a bit more interesting and disagree with Brother Dawood, respectfully. Why? Because I feel, and you're very welcome, I'm not a marja, so I won't issue any fatwas with anyone who disagrees with me. So you can say that you disagree with me, but I feel what happens in the Middle East and what's happening in the world today has a direct relevance on each and every person's lives here in the United States, in the United Kingdom, and anywhere in the world. Why? I'm not saying forget what's happening here. I'm not saying let what those events affect us in this country. No. I mean, whether we like it or not, it has a direct influence. And let me show you how. There is a dangerous movement out there. It starts with an E. Extremism. Exists in all forms and shapes within the Muslim ummah. And it's a cancerous venom that's trying to establish some kind of discord, hatred, and disunity. That particular movement is spreading. You only need to go to one place online and you'll find its teachings. YouTube. YouTube has become the number one source for disunity amongst Muslims. Yes? Followed by all the other sites. It has some good purpose. Yet you go to YouTube and you'll find the most atrocious, vile images of what's happening in Syria, for instance. Right? And so on and so forth. And people are asking questions. Where do Muslims stand when it comes to extremism? Are they speaking against extremism, both Sunni and Shia? And let's be absolutely honest. Let me tell you another story. That I was blessed amongst many times, alhamdulillah, to perform the pilgrimage of Hajj. And once during the pilgrimage, in those few days before the visitation to the land of Arafah, I took a taxi ride to a area in Mecca known as Aziziyah. And I was sitting there next to this driver who looked at me and said, "Where are you from?" I said, "I'm from Iraq." He turned around and said, Shia. We're 70%, but there's still a chance. So I said to him, "Yes, I'm fine, I'm happy. Is there a problem?" He says, "Yes, of course, so many problems." I said, "What is it? We've got a long way to go. Bismillah, we can talk in a very respectful, calm manner." One after the other, accusation and so on and so forth. Everything was answered. Then he said, "Interesting." I said, "Why?" He said, "Do you know where I've come from?" I said, "No." He said, "Only a few months ago," this was several years ago, he said, "Only a few months ago, I was in Syria and I crossed the border to Iraq and I was about to blow myself up." I said, "Where?" He said, "In a Shia mosque." Now, can you imagine? I'm sitting right next to somebody who wants to kill people like me. Imagine, I was thinking, you know what, I want to get off this car. I don't know whether I'll get there in one piece. But that movement exists. The ideology of hatred, and you all know what I'm talking about. This ideology, as much as it hates Shias, it hates Sunnis as well. Because it believes that it is the only form of salvation, and it is the number one exporter of terrorism in the world. 9/11, 7/7, Taliban, all those are responsible and are paid for and are supported by this dangerous ideology of Wahhabism. Now today the challenge, my dear brothers and sisters, is absolutely clear. The challenges for Muslims, Sunni and Shia, if we truly want to establish unity of purpose. There is an opinion, and I won't take much more of a time and we can open the discussion, but there is an opinion amongst certain individuals that perhaps the word unity is not something that can be accepted or is not as much of an incentive for people as the word proximity, at-taqreeb. Why? Because some people think of unity as relinquishing and forsaking their own beliefs and just coming together for the sake of oneness. Proximity amongst different groups is what we need. And at the same time, unity can be established, but it is a very lofty objective. Yet one thing is absolutely clear, and one thing that we have to do is stand together against extremist elements, hate preachers. Some of them come to the United Kingdom. I'm sure they've been coming to the States, trying to fuel this hatred amongst the Muslims, using what's happening in Syria and in Pakistan and in Bahrain and Iraq. And the target number one are Shias. They're for nothing other than the fact that they love the Ahl al-Bayt, and that's all. I haven't heard of any Shias calling out for the killing of others and so on and so forth, but they've been targeted. Now the idea, of course, is that this requires both sides. And I'm sorry to say, and I could be wrong, but I don't hear or have not necessarily found the strong Sunni moderate voices out there in the world. The extremists are talking and are on the television screens. I know Anjem Choudary very well, not personally, but he's caused us a lot of problems in the UK. And the media love him. They go to him straight away. What do you think about this? And do you know what? Last year, when I was blessed to be here in this hall, during the Ummah convention, Anjem Choudary and a bunch of his loonies went out in central London. For the first time in the history of Europe, about 100 people took the streets of central London demonstrating against what? Shias. They said Shias are shaitans, they're non-Muslims, and so on and so forth. What does it require then? If the Shias only speak out, nobody will listen. But if all Muslims speak out and say, you know what, we will not let you break this relationship that we have, the bond that we have between all Muslims. And likewise, if there are Shia extremist elements, and there are, not as many, but there are, Shias also need to speak out. And I'm not saying it because I'm a Shia, but our Maraji' have also spoken out against few people here and there who've come out disrespectfully, saying things which should not be said, and so on and so forth. So the mission is absolutely clear, that we have to foster this unity or coexistence or proximity by establishing brotherhood and rooting out extremism. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sheikh. So I think we've through our opening remarks hit some of the key themes of unity that we want to discuss. And again, going back to one of the points that Hajj Dawood made, that we're going to try to focus our discussion. Listen, I've been in many of these lectures and conferences where unity is discussed, and there's a lot of cliche topics that sometimes come up. Yes, we need to come together, we need to hold hands and different things. What I'm hoping is this session can be a practical session on how we can actually tackle a lot of the obstacles to unity on different levels, on the individual level, on the community level, and then on the broader level. And also, what we want to also focus on a little bit is within our own house, and to speak, that the unity within the broader Shia community level, broader societal level, and then on a national level, and how we can collaborate on different initiatives. Also, there may be disagreements up here, and we hope there are disagreements, because that is something that we also need to try to overcome. A disagreement should not be the source of disunity, and inshallah will help. Hopefully our panelists will tackle that. One of the things that I just want to bring up right away, and I want to get our panelists to input on this, is the hot topic issue of labels. When we label ourselves, or when we call ourselves, and at least from the Ummah organization standpoint, we've been not shy about calling ourselves an organization that attempts to promote the causes of the Shia Ithna Muslims of North America. How do you feel like that? Do you feel that actually is a negative impact on unity? And how would you address the issue of labeling ourselves? And we can start with Hajj Muhammad Torfa, and then we can go
around. First of all, when I talked about unity, I talked about the principle. I didn't want to address specific areas or specific states or countries, because the needs and wants of every group, of every city, of every people differs from others. Okay, I just wanted to make that point clear. But everybody, if every Muslim uses the thought that I talked about, the principle that I talked about, uniting behind what they need. Every unity needs different things. They have different wants. If they unite behind them, they will achieve them. They will be strong. They will be rich. They will be happy. Okay. Was there a special question?
The specific question was about labels. We would label ourselves as Shia Muslims.
I'm against that. I'm against labeling anybody with anything, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted us to be Muslims. I fail to see where Allah said, be a Shi'i, be a Sunni, be a Zaidi, be this or be that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, be a Muslim. When I am asked what faith I belong to, I never say I'm a Shi'i. I say I'm a Muslim, and I'm proud to be a Shi'i following the great Imam al-Imam Ali alayhi salam. And I don't do that because he happens to be named Ali, or the son-in-law of the Prophet, or the cousin of the Prophet. I follow him because according to the Prophet, he is the most knowledgeable. أنا مدينة العلم وعلي بابها. He is the most knowledgeable, and he is the most pious of everybody after the Prophet. And when he went to duel Umar ibn Uwaid, the Prophet said, نزل الإيمان كله للشرك كله. See, which means that Ali was the most pious of everybody after the Prophet. That's why I'm proud to follow him. But that does not make me any different from anybody. Nobody should disagree with me any more than I should disagree with him. What somebody does is between him and Allah. It's a direct relationship. It is not It does not impact the others. So why should we differ and fight about it? You believe what you want, I believe what I want. But let's all get together and serve the people's needs and wants. Thank you.
Sheikh Hilli, you have any comments on this? So, one of the realities on the ground, we hear this a lot, that it's nice, let's call ourselves all Muslims. A lot of times the reality becomes, if you are in an organization, and especially the evolution of Ummah itself, this organization, why do we even have this organization as Ummah? Is because the Shia Muslim community felt that we weren't getting our voices heard from the broader Muslim community. So at that point, what do? Sheikh Hilli, do you want to respond to that?
Well, I don't want to be the one who continuously disagrees. That's
why he's here on the panel.
I fully respect Al-Hajj Muhammad and his opinion. However, you see, there is no harm in calling ourselves American Muslim Shia. And I think that's what we have to try to understand, that identity is not an obstacle to unity. I can stand there and be a proud Shia and tell the world that I am Shia. I don't belong to OBL. Who's OBL? You all know, but no, everyone's scared to say. The idea is, I don't belong to his school of thought, of Bin Laden and anyone else. I belong to the school of Ali ibn Abi Talib, and I will want to ensure that the world knows who Ali ibn Abi Talib is. How do I become an ambassador of Ali ibn Abi Talib, who is nafsu Rasulullah? That Rasulullah is known through Ali ibn Abi Talib. I have to come out and I need to ensure that people are aware of a group of individuals who take a certain number of people as their role models, and they follow them and they follow their teachings. And I have an example that a few years ago in the University of Manchester, UK, we had a session whereby I was speaking, a priest, a rabbi, another Muslim leader was sitting on the panel. And we spoke and spoke and spoke. And there was an individual who raised his hands amongst the crowd and said, I have a question. Why are Muslims fighting each other, and why are they in a bad state? So each and every person answered in their own way. I said to them, look, I'm going to be absolutely honest. The Prophet of Islam, peace and blessings be upon him, and his holy progeny said, if you adhere to the book of Allah and to my progeny, you will not go astray. And that's where the problem lies. We have abandoned the family of the Holy Prophet. Therefore, by calling ourselves Shia, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm against an individual who's a Sunni, who's a Zaydi, who's a Ismaili, who's a Bohra, anyone else. Not at all. I am saying that, you know what, that's my identity, but I'll work with you for the common purpose, for the unity of purpose. But I will not forsake the fact that I am a Shia. I need to come out of the media and say I am Shia. I need to have organizations that say I am Shia. And in my humble opinion, this in no way contradicts or jeopardizes unity.
Hajj Dawood, I want to address this question towards you. That one of the issues and one of the major obstacles to unity or unity of purpose, or even defining that purpose, is having effective American or Western leadership amongst our communities. So can you address the issues of leadership and how we can work towards developing some type of platform or leadership to actually create that purpose?
Thank you for the question. And I also need to give a clarification to what our esteemed Sheikh said earlier. In no way was I saying, or it should have come out that I was saying to ignore all of the problems that go on in the Muslim world. What I'm saying is that we should not let our total agenda be concretized by things that are going on overseas that we cannot change with our hands, but yet they do affect us. So most of the Islamophobia that we face in America really is based upon crazies like Boko Haram, Al-Qaeda, Taliban, An-Nusra, people eating hearts. We understand that. But that's not something that we can directly change with our hands here, but we do, and we do have the obligation to speak out against that. Now, regarding that direct question, I am one of those people who, and I'm known for this in the community, but in terms of and I've said this for years and years, and it's not just because I'm born and raised in America and happen to have studied Islam formally. But I'm looking at it from a sociological perspective and the spread of Islam historically. When Islam spread to Iraq, then eventually there began to be a center of learning for Muslims in Iraq. And when Islam spread to Iran, there began centers of learning in Iran. And when Islam spread to the Maghrib, there were centers of learning in the Maghrib, in Senegal, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, which then bred indigenous leadership that had cultural literacy and competency and yet had Islamic knowledge. And I believe that our community, and fulfilling this unity of purpose, until we get to the point that the majority of our shuyukh and ulama and Islamic teachers who are sisters in our Islamic schools have traditional Islamic learning but have cultural literacy, and at least were raised in America, I don't think we can go but so far in getting and seeing establishing the type of community that we should have. This is my opinion, and anyone is free to disagree. If we look at the American Jewish community and how it established itself, the American Jewish community was in a similar situation as American Muslims are now. When they first immigrated here, the majority of the rabbis were exported rabbis. Eventually, it came to the point that they established the Hebrew colleges and they began to train their rabbis. And then their rabbis began to give calls of action to local and indigenous issues. So, for instance, you'll see that Jewish Americans were predominant, or they were very visible in the civil rights movement, for instance. It was their rabbis that gave them religious clarity and gave them dalil and encouragement to be involved in the civil rights movement. So, I mean, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but this is my perspective. And this is not to put down any of our ulama or any of our scholars who were born abroad, but the natural maturation of this community has to be that we begin to have more leadership that's born here and to establish Hausa and establish universities of Islamic learning right here in America that are in contact with the Islamic seminaries in Qum and Najaf, or in Sadaf, where the Zaydiyeen study at in Yemen, etc.
Thank you, Haj Dawood. So I know all the comments are excellent. Don't feel obliged to have to clap after each one, but all the comments are excellent. But we can hold it till the end, so we can just have a nice flow of discussion going back and forth. Dr. Rashid, you want to just make a few comments?
Yeah, just very quickly, Sheikh Hili, I think it's quite all right to disagree as long as we're not disagreeable. And so I shall disagree with you. Which is, I think you give OBL far too much credit to say he had thought. He was a spoiled child with lots of money and lots of guns. And it's unfortunate that we're all paying the price for it. But I think seriously on this question of labeling that you started us off with, is I think there I do agree with you. I think that from my personal perspective, right, we've talked about these verses of unity, but Allah also says in the Quran that we were created tribes and nations, that had He wished to make us one ummah, He could have done so, but He chose not to. That is our struggle to do that. And that I don't think difference prohibits or precludes unity. I think that difference is a chance for us to deepen and reflect on our own selves to approach that unity. You know, for me, one of the blessings of coming to this conference is an opportunity to, inshallah, sit with somebody like Sheikh Hili and hear of his love of Imam Ali, or hear of his love of the Ahlul Bayt, which is coming from a very different perspective than mine. But to hopefully then use that to help polish the mirror of my own heart in that. And that's the blessing. But I can't do that if I say we're the same. I can only do that if I say we're different. And then we can move from there to something greater.
Also, Dr. Rashid, just following up on what Dr. Haj Walid was saying, that this notion that to create this American Muslim leadership, and it's linked to creating academic institutions, especially coming from the Ismaili background with a lot of academic institutions. Have you guys found that a lot of your leaders, through the development of these academic institutions, that you've noticed a lot of effective leadership coming from that?
So, I think of the academic institutions we've started, none of them have been religiously based. They've been religiously motivated. So we focus on liberal arts, on health sciences. I think, and again, my understanding of it is that the family and the community will develop the ruh. What the community cannot do is develop Ak, and cannot develop Western educational system or more secularized academic institutions. That's where we as a community can step in and say, hey, if you know how to heal somebody, which is hard work, but if you know how to heal somebody, you're less likely to go out and break them. Right? So if you can build up, and you're invested in the process of building up, that brings the whole community up. And so when somebody starts chipping away and trying to take it down, the community comes in and says, no, we built this, you cannot tear it down. And then that leaves the space for that spiritual engagement. In other words, if people are struggling to eat, you have to address that before you say, this is how you pray.
I want to bring this back to a little bit more on a ground level, and Hajj Dawood, you can help me with this one. That a lot of times in our individual communities, that we see a great deal of disunity in terms of, I don't want to say disunity, but a lack of collaborations among the different cultural backgrounds. And a lot of our centers are, forget, the Shia, the Ismaili label, but this is the Pakistani center, this is the Lebanese center. Over your time, over your experience, how have you seen communities come out of that? And have you seen communities come out of that and become American Muslim centers?
I have seen a few communities come through that in my travels across the country, and that was primarily, again, it was very purposeful, where people who were elders who had wisdom in the community sought to diversify the board of directors, which then helps to set the tone for the Maracas. Because just having a center, when you say everyone's welcome, we're all Muslim, and they all come from one particular ethnicity, sometimes one particular village, it naturally excludes people. And I use this example. I love to eat. As you can tell, I love to eat. So I love to use examples about eating. So I actually spoke to this one elder who helped diversify our local Shura council here. And I said, don't say that it's unity that you call everyone to a preset table. So this guy's from Hyderabad, right? So I said, unity isn't just inviting everyone to the table and then you feed everyone biryani. I said, no, we need to invite the Nigerian brother and he brings some fufu. And then we have to invite the Saudi brother and bring some kapsa. And I want to bring some macaroni and cheese. And then we want the Bosnian to bring his kebab. And then we bring all our food together and we taste each other's food. We enjoy each other's food together. That's how it looks to have unity in the agenda where we have these ethnically stratified masajid. You see, but it has to be purposeful. People have to be able to bring their dish to the table and the needs and the sensitivities of their own ethnic group. So where I have seen that be successful in some masajid or some Maracas is where that was purposefully done. But there's centers right here in Metro Detroit. We have 16 masajid in Metropolitan Detroit. There's specifically, we can point to certain centers to say, okay, that's the Philistini masjid, they're Sunni. This is the one, they're from Yemen and they're from Aden. They're from the south part of Yemen because the northerners don't really feel welcome there. And then this is the one from Tibnin and that one from Bintish Bale. Like we know the deal, and there has to be some purposeful diversifying, both not just in ethnicity, also in gender. Because we can't continue to have half the voice of our community, which are women, not at the table and giving their input on how our community relations are and how our community should function. So it's not just ethnicity.
Hajj Turfa?
I was born in America, but I was raised in Lebanon. And I kind of lived through both cultures, okay? And I have a lot of experience in our community. And as far as I'm concerned, the reason they are not together, the reason they are divided is because each one of them puts its own interest before the interest of the people, before the common interest. See, in Western civilization, they always put the common interest first, then their own interest second. We do just the opposite. We put our own selfish, personal interest first, and then the common interest. That's why we're divided. Division does not mean animosity or hatred. if we only know how to deal with it. I think every sect should learn, understand the other's beliefs, respect them, and allow him to believe in whatever he wants. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, "Man sha'a falyu'min wa man sha'a falyakfur." See? La ikraha fi ddin. We should understand those differences and shelve them. And we should work together on the basis of what we agree on. The differences may be 10, 15, 20% at the most. Let's shove that away and let's hang on to the 80% that we agree on. Let's work together with the 80%. Then Islam can flourish.
Thank you. Sheikh Ali, I want to put this question towards you. Do you feel like, should all our centers be English only? Because we find that language is often one of the main dividing factors just naturally. If I can't understand the language of the sermon, why would I go? What are your thoughts on that?
This comes, of course, to the idea of culture and the whole culture versus religion discussion, which perhaps takes us slightly out of the purpose of this particular discussion that we're having at the moment. I recall holding a youth discussion forum on television live on one of the satellite channels, and there were brothers and sisters sitting together, and the question was, should culture come first or religion? And naturally, people want to say religion should always come first, and that's the right thing. However, one sister went overboard and said straight away, you know, there is absolutely no place in culture. What's the point of culture? Islam covers everything. Islam gives us the direction, and it is the way of life as it is, of course, but there's no place in culture. The first thing I said to her was, can you tell me what you eat at home? She said, what do you mean? I said, what the type of food you eat? She said, I can't remember. She said something like curry or biryani. I said, what is the Islamic meal that you eat? She said, what do you mean? I said, well, you know, you said that there is no place in culture, whereas you are practicing or you are adhering to some cultural values. In other words, language falls under this category as well. Islam encourages this diversity as long as it doesn't contradict the principles and the values. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala highlights the differences that you and I exist as far as our tendencies, tastes, language, background, cultural affiliations. Language is very important. And I feel that in order to promote English as a language that should be encouraged in centers and generally spoken in different places, areas of worship, lectures, sermons, workshops, and so on, this does not mean that we forsake other languages. Our scholars, our maraji' have continuously emphasized the need to look after the mother tongue language. It's an extra skill. It's wonderful to be able to speak Arabic, Farsi, Urdu, all the other languages out there. It adds an additional powerful tool to discuss, to communicate. Therefore, what we need to do is to ensure that we preserve these languages and to ensure that they continuously spoken at home. There are classes to encourage our youth to practice them. But at the same time, we should not forget that many youth who have lived all their lives, majority of their lives in the West, think in English, speak only in English. So in order to get the message across to them, we have to do it in English, but in no shape or form should we simply ignore or discourage the usage of other languages. Therefore, programs could run parallel. And I'm against programs being cancelled in other languages so that simply English can take precedence. But I want to also finish the story. I've just realized I didn't finish the earlier story that I mentioned at the university to highlight the point that I was making, that when I said this issue about the hadith al-Thaqalain, an individual stood up from the crowd and said, I'm an advisor in the government of the United Kingdom to the Prime Minister. This was around 2005. He said, I'm an advisor, and this is the first time I hear somebody speaking about a group of people known as the Ahl al-Bayt. I've heard these types of Sunni, Shia terms before, but I've never gone to detail as to what they actually believe. And you know, I have friends in media, I have friends in politics, and they always say the same thing. Politicians don't have a clue as to what's going on in terms of the differences that exist between Sunnis and Shias, ideologically and theologically, as well as jurisprudentially and other ways. We are told, this particular individual said that, where were you? He looked at me and said, why haven't you made your voices heard as a group of individuals who believe in a particular set system? You know, a particular teaching. Go out there and speak to people about your beliefs so that people know that you exist. And that was just to highlight the point that I mentioned earlier.
Sheikh, but you know, going back to this language issue, then you know we hear that our scholars and everybody says preserve the mother tongue and everything, but when we're talking about breaking down barriers, developing unity of purpose, having these American Muslim centers, that what we see on the ground in the reality of the situation is that as this continues, that that it's not that there are just parallel programs, but for example, I can't bring my good friend, I'm hoping my good friend now, Haj Dawood Walid, to a lot of my programs because the programs are in a different language. So these bonds, these friendships, these breaking down of racial, cultural barriers just don't seem to progress. Granted, this topic may be related to a different issue, and I think there is a workshop later on this afternoon about culture versus religion that maybe we can hash out a little bit more. So now at this point, what I'll request is from the audience, we can take a few questions. If you could just start lining up in the middle of the hall, and I'll ask some of our volunteers to come down. We're probably all asleep by now, but some of the volunteers to come by and help them with a question and answer. One thing that I actually the last question I want to ask our panelists before we go to the question and answer is, if you had to pick, what would that purpose be? If we had to go back and as going back from this, hey, we want to have unity of purpose. We want unity of purpose. And Hajj Muhammad Turfa said that every locality that's different, but for Western, predominantly American Muslim, Shia Muslims, what would that purpose entail?
That purpose, in my views, should be that everybody understands and respects the beliefs and practices of another. Set that aside. Then let's work together as Muslims based on the 80% or better that we agree on. Does that make sense? Instead of keep talking about the differences and about trying to make the other come my way or me come his way, and so forth and so on. I say set that aside. Let's work together on the basis what we agree on. Then we can accomplish our goals.
Unity of purpose, one tangible thing that I think we all could get together to work on is confronting our common adversary irrespective of our school of thought or ethnicity, and that is Islamophobia. When we have people like Bill Maher on TV ridiculing Muslims, when we have people like Newt Gingrich, who's former Speaker of the House, on CNN making Islamophobic comments, when we have people in Congress, people in the state legislators putting forth anti-Sharia legislation, when we have a state system in many states where by design Muslim children go into the foster care system and are deliberately placed in homes of Christians, then I think that we all can get together and rally to confront Islamophobia that is a common adversary to us all.
It's funny you mentioned Speaker Gingrich, because he actually established the Muslim prayer room in the House of Representatives in the 90s before there was money to be made in hating Muslims. Maybe we should figure out how to make money loving Muslims. So what is justice? Justice is when love and law come together. And I think we as a community understand law. What we don't understand is love. And so if we propose anything, if we work as a unity towards anything, it's to create a culture of love. And that love can be for anything, Ahlul Bayt, for our family, for humanity. But to bring that love together with the law and create then will inshallah result in the culture of justice. And we have to think about justice and transforming this into a much more just society, racially, in terms of gender, economics, food security, educational access. Right? All these things, when they start coming into play, when we lift that because we believe with ourselves and manifest through ourselves that idea of justice, and we create that more just society, then we will transform the world with fire.
Sheikh Hilli, and then we'll go over the questions.
I think the purpose that will bring us all together is this name. This name behind us here. That there is no Muslim around the world who, when they mention the name Muhammad, the heart doesn't fill with love, affinity, and loyalty. And people, unfortunately, have misrepresented this blessed, great individual. They've hijacked his name. And it's time for the majority of Muslims who are peaceful, law-abiding, they love coexistence, to rise up to the challenge and understand how this great individual lived his life, how even he dealt with his enemies, how he was the beacon and the manifestation of mercy and forgiveness, and when we come to understand his biography truly, then that will bring us together. And I say this, and I truly mean it, that without understanding the biography and the teachings of those who are closest to him and are loved by all, the common denominator, and that's the Ahlul Bayt. There is no Muslim out there today who claims to be a Muslim and does not love the Ahlul Bayt. Everybody says we love the Ahlul Bayt. Yes, at least publicly or outwardly. And in order for us to come together, we need to stick to the common aspect, common denominator that we all share, and that's the Holy Prophet of Islam and his holy, pure progeny. Why? Just to say final word, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قُلْ إِن كُنْتُمْ تُحِبُّونَ اللَّهَ فَاتَّبِعُونِي يُحْبِبُكُمُ اللَّهِ. If you're seeking the love of the Almighty Jalla wa Ala, then the only path is through this man.
So this time we have time for about 3 questions, so go ahead and And if you could keep the questions brief, and then we'll keep the answers brief because we're running really short on time, but I want to give time for the interaction.
Assalamu alaikum, panels and Ummah. And it's a wonderful conference. I'm sure that we have all enjoyed here. But listening to all of our speakers and looking at the tolerance ratio they have, I'm coming to the conclusion that we need to have raised our tolerance to the other sects of our brothers and sisters, those that do not preach, those that do not come to our masajids and places. We need to reach them. Our reaching power is very low, and we do not encourage many intra-faith or interfaith people to come in to see us. I think Ummah is doing a wonderful job. Ummah can bring interfaith programs, maybe 2015. We can arrange all of these. I think Ismaili Brothers, they have a very good approach, and they have a good community in Chicago also. I think we should arrange, and we should put our step forward in this direction. So I would like to know about the brothers here, what they have done reaching to the communities, other ones. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Rashid, you want to make a comment on that? And then just a quick, from the Ummah perspective, just kind of responding. Dr. Mubarak's one of the board of directors as well. But last year, we had a interfaith code of honor signing here with the representatives of CARE, MPAC, and various others. So Ummah, and then throughout the year, alhamdulillah, we've been engaged, very much so engaged with the leadership, the broader Muslim leadership. So that's just a little brief comment on Ummah. So Dr. Rashid, and then we'll take the next question.
First of all, thank you for the kind words. I'm very appreciative. It's such a big question, and I think that the question of interfaith is scary. Interfaith, in many regards, is easier than intrafaith because we can say whatever we want to people who don't know anything, right? And we're always right. But can we say we're right in front of somebody who can ask us, "Are you sure you're right?" And so I think interfaith is very scary. I have been blessed to have been able to work with very, very many Muslims in this country, Sunni, of various schools. I've worked with some of the Salafi communities in America. And so I want you to think about that, right? That there is an Ismaili that some Salafis will call when they say, we've got a problem, we don't know how to fix it, right? But what I've always been told is that the reason people are always willing to work with me is because they never feel that I tell them anything but what I feel. That what is in my head and in my heart is on my tongue. And I think when we approach with that level of sincerity, alhamdulillah, that they have that opinion of me, that when we approach with that level of sincerity, things will come. There are people who are thirsting to build these coalitions, who want to say, we have bigger problems. We don't need to inherit these divisions. And I think we have to just be willing to take that on. Perhaps not as a whole community, but to identify those people we can send out and do that.
Thank you. So we'll take 2 more brief questions. Please, no comments. Just go straight to the question, please.
In medicine, if we treat a person with a cancer and we fail, and all of a sudden, after a few months of treatment, we find the cancer went from the prostate to the brain and to the liver, we call it as a failure. And we call all the team to come along and find out what went wrong. I wonder, what would the team think about what happened with our fighting to Al-Qaeda and the terrorism from there? It's been more than 10 years ago. We fight at Al-Qaeda. Everybody was scratching his head after September 11, knowing what is Al-Qaeda. Nobody knows what's he, she, it. Everybody went, we fight it. Now Al-Qaeda give a birth to Al-Nusra and to X and to Y, and they are now in Lebanon and Syria and Iraq, everywhere. 200 British citizens fighting in Syria with Al-Qaeda, with Al-Nusra. They are waiting to come back to Britain and to Europe, as well as some American, I believe, Canadian as well. So this is serious. I wonder, what would you call what's happening in our fight against the terrorism and the Sheikh Al-Halli was there, and how unity can work to stand up to this problem. It's a serious problem. If we're not going to meet and united around fighting extremism, we're not going to meet around Tabula or Kubba or anything else.
Yes, so this goes back to the issue that Sheikh Ali brought up of extremism. If you could just keep your comments brief, and then we'll go to the last question.
Very, very briefly, I think the problem that is quite strife amongst Muslim communities, especially in Europe and in places in the Middle East as well, is another word that begins with I, ignorance. There's widespread ignorance about the beliefs. I think Hajj Muhammad said a very important point about learning from each other, understanding each other's practices, and accepting them and respecting them. That's very, very important. I find that, unfortunately, what's happened is in the Middle East now, if you go to certain countries, there is widespread Shia-phobia. I know there's Islamophobia, but believe me, brothers and sisters, you go there and you say you're Shia, and people will, well, the least they'll do is frown at you, but I don't want to say what else they can do. And that's because what they've heard in these satellite channels that spread venom and hatred. There are at least several out there that are specifically 24 hours a day targeted against the Shia and their beliefs and so on and so forth. So the problem that we're facing is not only military when it comes to terrorists of Al-Qaeda, the ISIS, the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, or Al-Nusra and all the terrorism that is happening in the Middle East, in Pakistan, in Bahrain, in Syria and Iraq. The problem is also ideological. There's a lot of money being pumped to finance these satellite channels, and at the same time publications, websites and so on and so forth. So where do we go from here? The responsibility, I feel, falls on many levels. First level is on scholars. Scholars from all different denominations, sects, to come together, to stand together in defiance of extremism and terrorism, to stay united, to say that you will not break us despite all the temptations, because there's a lot of money that's being spent to tempt individuals to come out and say certain things. Second level is amongst the masses themselves. Wherever you could be, you establish this understanding of the other. If you're at college, you have sessions to dispel misconceptions about the Shia, for instance. They don't have a different Quran. They don't believe Imam Ali should have been the Prophet. They don't do this and that, and so on. They don't believe that the wives of the Prophet committed indecency, and so on and so forth. We come together and you fight these misconceptions to increase knowledge of people and to fight ignorance.
Okay, I think we have time for maybe one more. Nabil, Brother Amir Abbas, and then...
Okay. My question is, the topic was unity of purpose. We talked a lot about unity. We didn't really talk about the purpose. Because unless we have a common purpose, what is there to unite for? So what is that common purpose that all Muslims should have? And I mean, I can give you my opinion, and I would like to hear your opinion. We were created by Allah for a purpose. And if we know and we agree upon that, what that purpose is, then that could be a common purpose.
Thank you. And then that was one of the questions I was alluding towards the end of the panel as well. In the interest of time, I'd ask Hajj Muhammad Turfa to kind of make some comments on that.
You know, as I said earlier, every community, every state, every city, every country has different needs, different wants. But to me, the main common purpose today, the main common purpose for all the Muslims throughout the world is to remove the cell of that cancer, okay, that is killing innocent men, women, and children and destroying the infrastructures of the Muslims in Syria and Iraq and the other countries. That should be the number one common purpose for all the Muslims. Those people who are committing these atrocities are devils who are fueling terrorism on this earth, and I'm sure in the hereafter they will be fueling the fire of hell.
And then also just briefly that to respond to the question before, just to summarize what the comments were earlier, that Hajj Dawood Walid had mentioned that one of the key purposes that he feels that we should rally behind is Islamophobia, and Dr. Hussein Rashid mentioned this concept of creating this culture of love with culture of love and justice and law together to create this justice on a community level and on a broader level. So those were some of the key things. And then Sheikh Muhammad al-Hilli had mentioned that our unity of purpose should rally behind the person that we're holding this conference for, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then we'll have the last question. Then Dr. Abdi, if you could start walking your way up to the stage for the final part. And Nabil, why don't you go ahead and ask your question?
My question is related to, I guess, the tension that exists or the arguments that exist in trying to figure out the source of violence in the Middle East and across the world. Everyone on the panel has pointed to, extremism and the importance of unity and love and hate. But there is actually another school of thought that says it has nothing to do with religion. That all of the violence that we see, if you were to say that it's related to religion, that's like saying Democrats and Republicans are against each other because Republicans are evangelical and Democrats are another religion, or that British government officials who fight against each other is because one is Catholic and one is Protestant, and then trying to explain why Catholics and Protestants divided over religion 1,000 years ago. It's completely irrelevant. What this other school of thought amongst political analysts say is that it's related to authoritarianism, poverty, power. That when you mention the Taliban, it has nothing to do with Sunnism, it has nothing to do with Wahhabism, but they are actually warlords, and that the Shabab in Somalia are warlords, that this is an issue about people wanting natural resources, fighting over natural resources, over money, petrodollars in Saudi Arabia, everywhere. So now my question, perhaps Dr. Hussein can respond to it, is do you feel that there is some validity in this other side of arguments where it has nothing to do with religion, but these social, political, economic issues? Thank you.
Thank you, Nabil. So I actually opened, talking about the Imam's speech at Brown in the Canadian Parliament. In both places, he talked about understanding the political, cultural, economic context of these conflicts, not seeing them as primarily theological. Not only has the Imam said it, but as an academic also, I see that it is very easy to mobilize around religion. It's exactly as you've described it. What I fear is that, and the sister who talked about cancer, that the cancer becomes normal. So that everything has to be seen through the lens of religion, right? So that we turn around and we say, yes, it is related to poverty, it's related to material circumstance, it is related to American foreign policy. Let's not kid ourselves, right? Afghanistan is a result of what we call blowback, right? Unintended consequences of our foreign policy intervention. Okay, the Taliban is, we can absolutely trace it. Okay, all of these factors come into play. The solution is all of these factors as well. So religion will play an important role in it, right? And if I can just touch back, sister, on your point, that when we say that combating extremism, I feel sort of tired with this personally. Combating extremism is not getting us anywhere. The radiation therapy is not working anymore, right? So what's the counter-biologic, right? Is it 10,000 doses of measles vaccine that will create this, response? In other words, the extremists have created a narrative that lets people buy into it, people who are otherwise disaffected. Do we have a better narrative to give? Do we have a better narrative that says to love your brother is to build up? And we're not only going to tell you to love your brother is to build up, but we as your brothers and sisters love you enough that we will help you build up. We're going to come with you and help you set up, reestablish food security. We're going to come with you and help you set up your civil society again. Right? That we have the ability to do this, and we're not just going to tell you we love you, but we're going to show you we love you. And here's a different story for you to follow. Do we have that commitment? And I think this comes back to what Brother Dawood was saying. If we can't even do that in Detroit, how are we going to do that in Nairobi? Right? And so, yes to everything you said, and more.
Thank you so much. This time, if Dr. Ehtesham Abdi could come up to the podium, I'd like to take this time to really thank all of our panelists here. I know it was a tough slot to put you guys in, the Sunday afternoon slot after lunch and a short lunch break. But alhamdulillah, I really feel like we had a lively session. We had some important topics discussed. Please forgive me if I pushed anybody's boundaries or made anybody uncomfortable in any way. And I would really like to thank all of you as well. I'd like to invite the president of the organization, Dr. Ehtesham Abdi, to close out the main sessions with a note. Welcome with a loud salawat.
A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. It was a great session today, and yesterday we visited everything. I'm just here to put a sort of a closure to the conference of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There was a team in Dearborn that has worked tirelessly for last month or so, and last 3 days they've been sleeping at 2 a.m. in the morning and back here at 7 a.m. So please, a big round of applause for the team in Dearborn. These guys are phenomenal, the amount of time and energy they have put to make this convention happen. Secondly, I would like to thank Dr. Parveen Kazmi to running a very successful matrimonial session with her team. And really, she worked tirelessly all day on her feet and trying to make it happen. Then I would like to thank other people who, I cannot mention everyone's name who I can thank, but there were a lot of people working behind the scene to make this convention happen on a yearly basis from last 12 years. I would also like to thank the board of directors for giving us the opportunity and the program committee to build up a program that will be accepted by everyone. We have a very interactive website. What I would like to do is to see your comments regarding the conference on the website. You can use Twitter, you can be on the Facebook, but please let us know. What do you think about the programming, how the things went? I had a bunch of comments today from people that we should talk about this and that. We've been doing a lot of things over the 12 years. And there's a big history on the internet, on our website, that will give you the insight that we have talked about the media, we have to talk about a lot of important topics over the years, and what UMAA is doing on a regular basis, not just the conference. So please visit our website. And I again thank everyone, especially the panel here for this afternoon session, which was enlightening. We still need to find the unity of purpose. I was sitting there trying to listen, and I'm trying to sort out in my head, what is the unity of purpose? What is our purpose? Our purpose, I'm being very realistic, our purpose is to save the name and the integrity of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. Because that's what we are. And we have to keep that thing in mind, because whatever is going on around the world, we can just educate. It's education, education, education. That's the way I see it. And that's why our motto is that we are all for civil rights, human dignity, okay, and the protection of minorities where the minorities are being prosecuted in different countries, rather than making a sectarian issue. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Avdi, for that note. And then Haj Muhammad Turfa just
15 seconds. I like to conclude by reminding you and myself that when you're speaking about Islam, you are speaking about Ahlul Bayt. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, I'm leaving with you two great things, the Holy Quran and members of my house. They are together. They will never depart from each other. So when you say you're a Muslim, you're in essence saying you belong to Ahlul Bayt. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.